Batherson wins it in overtime.
Brady Tkachuk, breakaway shoots, scores!
Hey everyone, welcome back to Sens Talk. My name is Brandon Plant and I am your host. We have a fantastic guest today, a friend of the show. It's TSN's Jon Abbott, voice of the Ottawa Senators on TSN. Jon, welcome back to Sens Talk, my friend. How was your summer and how are you doing?
Oh, it's good to be back because that means hockey's almost back as we get ready for opening night, and I'm fantastic. I had a great summer, lots of time spent with my kids, playing and coaching t-ball, so pretty funny moments there. Some good summer weekends with the family, but every once in a while, as we get through August, you start getting that itch, and then September and certainly in October, I'm ready for hockey season, so bring it on.
Yeah, and do we have a future Shohei Ohtani in the wings here, Jon? What's going on with that?
I don't know about that. Right now, it's all about fundamentals, running to first base instead of third when you hit it. So it was a good summer of learning for the group of about 30 youngsters we were coaching.
For sure. Hey, you know what? Maybe a Canadian Ohtani would not be a bad thing. Blue Jays, get an eye on this kid. But let's get right into it. I know you're a busy guy, and the season's going to be very, very close. You got a lot of things going on, and we really appreciate, you hopping on the show. So today for this episode of Sens Talk, we're going to take a look at the Ottawa Senators and preview the 2023-2024 season. We're doing it this late. Tomorrow, Wednesday, we're recording this on Tuesday. Tomorrow, Wednesday, is Game 1 against the Carolina Hurricanes. And yesterday, rosters became official with the cap-compliant deadline. So here is your Senator opening night roster for 2023-2024. We have Drake Batherson, Eric Brandstrom, Thomas Chabot, Rourke Chartier, Jacob Chychrun, Anton Forsberg, Claude Giroux, Ridley Gregg, Travis Hamonic, The Hammer, Matthew Joseph, Mark Kaslik, Parker Kelly, Jonas Korpisalo, Dominic Kubalik, Zach McEwen, Jake Sanderson, Tim Stützle, Timmy Superstar, as Johnny like to say, Vladimir Tarasenko, Brady Tkachuk, and Artem Zub is your Ottawa Senator roster for 2023-2024. Obviously, two notable players not included in that will be Josh Norris, who is on the roster. We'll get into this a little later. He is on the roster. He's not on the injured reserve. He's day-to-day. It's a very weird situation with what's going on there, and we'll get into that later. And, of course, Shane Pinto remains unsigned. Now, before we get into the expectations of guys like Stützle and Tkachuk and all that fun stuff, there are some notable players who did and who did not make the team that were on the bubble. So some notable players that, are on the bubble who made the team are Rourke Chartier, for example, who many people are surprised made the team. And, of course, Parker Kelly, who many saw would likely be dropped down with the acquisition of Zach McEwen. And then there are notable players who did not make the team, which are likely more so to do with the fact of the cap situation, being Yuri Smejkal being signed over from Czech Republic in Europe, of course, playing last year in the SHL in Sweden, and as well Jacob Bernard Docker clearing waivers. So, Jon, I just threw a lot of information at you. I am so sorry. Pick off wherever you would start, but wherever you'd like, pardon me. But maybe we start off with the notable players who did and who did not make the team on the bubble.
Yeah, it's really tough. It's hard to see Josh Norris, a guy that's put in so much work, not be able to, as far as we believe, start the opening night in Carolina against the Hurricanes. And, that has a ripple down effect from there. And then you include Pinto being absent, as you just said. And, those are two huge holes to fill. And so the ideal lineup that you thought you were going to drop in the summer, over the summer leading into training camp is not the one that you're going to ice on Game 1 in all likelihood. And so is Rourke Chartier an everyday NHLer? Well, you know what? He's been a serviceable fill-in. He's played up before, so at least he knows the organization. 20-goal guy with the American Hockey League, but more importantly, we're going to see how he fits in to support things down the middle. And Ridley Gregg, that's going to be a big trial by fire as well. So, it'll be interesting for me to see how quickly DJ Smith perhaps changes from, what looked to be, if he had all of his weapons available, a really solid top 9 and a balanced 4-line team to, trying to complement different players now so you have some spread out threats, but how soon does he need to go to a top 6 and a bottom 6 to try and make a difference in a game? So in other words, what you see him start with against the Hurricanes may not be what he finishes with. And I think that's where you get the additions of guys like Vladimir Tarasenko, Dominic Kubalik, who can play up and down the lineup. Those are going to be so crucial. Never mind rounding out for depth scoring and being hard to play against, which they will, I think, when the Sens get their full complement of players. But right now they're going to need those guys to play up and down in different positions, depending on the score of the game and how badly they need them late in hockey games. So thankfully, despite the fact that you're missing two key centermen, I do like that Claude Giroux can step in and take faceoffs. I do like that there is some depth scoring. So I think there might be enough there to stem the tide temporarily. But, it is going to be tough. You mentioned Chartier's name. It'll be a pretty steep learning curve for him. And when you look at one of the things I was excited about with this team moving into the start of the season is that they were going to have a balanced lineup and, hopefully help out their 5-on-5 scoring, which desperately needs a boost. Will that be the case through the first handful of games if they can't get Norris in there? I'm not so sure. That's yet to be remain for the outcomes. So it'll be it's going to be a real big test right off the hop here, isn't it?
Absolutely. And look, Rourke Chartier, like you mentioned, he's got NHL minutes before. He looked fine. And when you're in the bottom six, you need a guy that can be that kind of grinder type of forward. But like you mentioned yourself, and we've seen Tarasenko and Kubalik in not warm-ups, in practices, the first practice today, for example, they were listed on the third line. So I think DJ Smith acknowledges the fact that, especially with Norris and Pinto out of the lineup, they desperately need to add some goal scoring to that bottom six. What makes me curious, though, about bringing in a Chartier over even a Cole Reinhardt, who, Pierre Dorion last year mentioned as a guy that would compete for a roster spot this year, actually looked pretty good in camp and the preseason. I'm kind of shocked he didn't get a better look. And Roby Yarventi as well, who I understand if you don't want to have a guy like that centering your third line. I understand it. But at the same time, I mean, if you're already looking to get scoring on your third line with Kubalik and Tarasenko there, why not just have a more defensive, reliable guy like Joseph drop down instead of on the second line? Then you have Yarventi there. I mean, once again, no matter what it is, you're going to have somebody inexperienced in that position. Yarventi was drafted with a second-round pick. He looked great in camp. Scored a few goals in the preseason as well. And I think he would have given this team a good offensive boost. But more importantly, he was great in the preseason. And I really would have loved to see him get that opportunity. Speaking of that, and we didn't mention this name really, Yuri Smejkal, who I've been all over since signing out of the SHL. The check forward is exactly what you want in your bottom six, especially with the DJ Smith type of team. You know this, John. You watch the Sens nearly every single game. You cover half the games at very least. Yuri Smejkal is exactly what this team needs in the bottom six. He's got size. Decent enough speed to keep up with the NHL game, but with that size, he uses that size to create offense. And as well, he's a good two-way, forward. He can back check. He's physical in our own zone as well. But offensively speaking, having a guy like that, who we don't really have in the bottom six, that can use his body to create offense, is a valuable asset. And I think he will be back. The only reason right now I think he's not here is he's not a center, and we don't have the cap space. What do you think about Yuri Smejkal? And JBD as well, who frankly likely would be up here if we had the cap space.
Yeah, those, what's interesting and what last year or even the last couple of years have taught us, Brandon, is that, man, you need guys that you can rely on to come up from the American Hockey League and fit in to an NHL roster. And, I'm really excited about Smejkal and the name you mentioned previous, Yarventi. I think, like you, I was keeping a close eye on those guys through camp and into the preseason. I thought Yarventi really handled himself and adapted very well. Now, that's a short sample size. And so I try to take a big picture view on things. And if I'm DJ Smith starting my, campaign shorthanded, the big names we mentioned, no Pinto, no Norris, you need all hands on deck. You need guys that you don't have to question are going to work out for the most part, if possible. And you need guys that have potentially been there before, at least know what you're trying to implement. And so as good as Smejkal and Yarventi showed themselves in the preseason, those are pretty green guys as far as it comes to the National Hockey League, the day-to-day, and what DJ Smith is looking for. He doesn't really have to think too much about guys like Chartier. He doesn't have to think too much about guys like Ridley Gregg. Those are players that have at least experienced, albeit a short tenure, a little bit of tenure with the big clubs. So I think those are moves that make sense in the short term, because this team needs as many wins as possible, as many points as possible, as early as possible, not only to buck the trend that they've set the last couple of years where November gets them in trouble, where the start of their season, is kind of a flash in the pan, and then they have to make up for a little bit of a slump, in that second month later. Well, I don't know if they have that luxury. They have 13 games
No,
until they head to Sweden.
they don't.
5 of those 13 are against division teams. And if you take off wheels up to Sweden, you're in some kind of a hole. Well, that's going to be even tougher to climb out of with all the travel and then all the catch up when you come back. So I think it's ideal, as Mike Johnson stated on TSN 1200, about, collecting a good sum of points before you head away and play internationally. So I think that's why you have some of those roster spots. But I'm encouraged by the fact that Belleville is still going to have plenty of fruit on the vine, plenty of fruit on the branches to be able to fill in if need be. And, Smakel, JBD, you mentioned Jarventi. Those are guys. Thompson's back now.
So cool.
That should be expected. I know that's your boy. That should be expected to come in if the situation's not looking as good or some injuries strike up top.
Absolutely. And I think you nailed it on the head there. I mean, you want to have people you can trust, especially if it's just for a short stint. I think, and I kind of changed my opinion here because of what you said there. It's only for the short stint. The fact they haven't put Josh Norris on the IR and they're still calling him day to day. He's likely not going to play that first game tomorrow, but in the next few games, he should play. Now, it's still very concerning to me, the uncertainty around the situation. But hey, you know what? As long as they're doing it right and they're not rushing him in, and he's, at the end of the day, as long as he plays the full year for the most part and misses a few games, it's fine. So for the short term, I understand it. But if Norris is put on the IR, you got to have to bring in some offensive guys for the bottom 6, because Chartier or Cole Reinhardt, no disrespect, they're not going to produce offense. Not many of those other guys in the bottom 6 will score either. And you don't want to stretch thin. You don't have your top 6 stretched thin either. Having Tarasenko on the third line with Kubalik, that's fine for the short stint. But long term, what happens if Joseph's not clicking there either, right? So here's hoping that Norris is back soon, because that's a massive piece of the puzzle. They've paid him nearly $8 million a year for a reason. He's a core piece of this franchise, a 30-plus goal scorer. And once again, the fact he's not on the IR means that he should be hopefully in the lineup within the first 5 games or so of the year. Because like you said, John, you're absolutely right. Got those divisional games. You have that trip in Sweden. This team historically has started off poorly the last few years. It just cannot happen again. So we'll see what happens with that. And by the way, we haven't even mentioned Shane Pinto's unsigned. And that's because, and I've kind of alluded to this, we have no cap space. So obviously we're going to get into expectations of the season and who you're looking at particularly this year. But I just wanted to get a quick idea of what you think Ottawa should do to kind of get themselves out of this cap dilemma they found themselves in.
Well, it's going to be a busy couple of months, I think, for Pierre Dorion, Steve Staios, and maybe Michael Andlauer as he continues to review the team he's now the owner of. And certainly Shane Pinto needs to be signed ASAP. Is there cap gymnastics you have to pull off? Well, a little bit. You speak to people like Bruce Garriock. You speak to other people around the league, and you get the sense that it's not impossible. It's not the worst situation, but it's going to take a little bit of work to get done, both with the term the player's looking for, the number the player's looking for, but also what you have to do manipulating your roster to be able to fit that player in. So on one hand, I think there's many people that thought, okay, if Norris isn't there game 1, he'll go LTIR. There's a bit of a problem fix. Maybe somebody gets moved down, you eat a little bit of salary or possibly a trade, and there you go. Well, it might not be that easy. And if this team had their choice, I'm sure they'd like to have Norris playing. And so, that's a great sign that he practiced on Tuesday, going to travel with the team on Wednesday. You never really know, depending on what his clearance is on Wednesday, although not expecting him to play against the Hurricanes. But you're right. The fact that he's even traveling is a great sign. I mean, usually if you're an injured player, you talk to guys around the league, what's one of the worst parts of feedback about being an injured player? Well, never mind the rehab, never mind the initial injury itself. It's that you're isolated. You're kind of an island. You go work out on your own. You don't practice with the team. You get closer to skating. You skate on your own, and it's just a lot of you time and a skills coach. Well, that's not the case for Josh Norris this time, so that is encouraging. And you hope, like you said, that he gets back in the lineup sooner rather than later. But I'm not sure. I do not know how they're going to wrangle Pinto in, but the clock is ticking, and the fact that it didn't get done at the end of training camp is disappointing. The fact that it didn't get done for game 1 is disappointing. And man, the player and the team cannot afford to have this drag out, both for the results and the scoring that the Sens need. And quite frankly, for a guy like Shane Pinto, who missed a ton of time already in his short career, even though for the results he had last year, to come in and fit in, hopefully before they get to Sweden, would be ideal. So yeah, that's a pretty tight timeline to try and make something happen. And the best case scenario, in my opinion, is that the team starts well despite some of these injury setbacks. Players, like some of the depth guys you mentioned, are performing. Best time to make a move and try and relieve yourself of some salary, and maybe Pinto, just maybe, slides in there sooner rather than later.
It's just so unfortunate for Shane Pinto, who literally did everything asked upon him last year. I mean, this guy was a rookie last year, okay? And he put up 20 goals, played top 6 minutes in one of the toughest, frankly, or a top 2 tough division in hockey, the Atlantic Division. You're going up against some of the best centers in hockey. You're going up against some of the best centers entirely in the game's history in the Eastern Conference. Malkin, Crosby, Bergeron, the list goes on. So many centers this guy had to face every single game last year, pardon me. And all he's asking for is, it's been reported they're stuck between 2 to 2.5 million. And, normally the Sens, I'm sure, would just defer and give an extra couple $100,000, especially with new ownership. But it goes back to the past mistakes of management and the mismanagement and the buyouts that has led to upwards of 5 to 7 million or so, I believe. That's a rough estimate, being taken up by, buyouts. Now, at the time, it makes sense, but, just now looking at it from a clear view, with everything said and done, with all the signings in the offseason, how did we not manage more space, or how did we not plan this properly for Shane Pinto? We put him in a tough situation last year. He did far more than we could have asked for. He has a very fair asking price. He's not even being ridiculous about it. He's being very respectful, hasn't asked for a trade. And everyone else is getting paid except him. And, it's unfortunate for him. I hope they resolve it soon because, like you said, John, this team desperately needs Shane Pinto in the lineup, especially with Norris out, because last year they can score. We saw it on the power play. They can score, but the 5-on-5 lacked because the top 6 was relied on for literally everything, and the bottom 6 couldn't do anything. So losing that ability to have a good depth down the middle will truly hurt this team, and I really, really hope. I don't know how either. I was looking for answers from you, John. Looks like you and I are still kind of trying to figure it out, and I think Pierre Dorion and Steve Stais and the Sens are the same way, but hopefully they figure it out soon, and hopefully Pinto is signed very, very soon because, yeah, I mean, you got to feel bad for the guy. It's just, he's done everything asked upon. He's asking for a pretty reasonable, dollar amount, and hopefully it's resolved soon. Now, I want to move on here. We've talked about the bubble players. We've spoken about Norris and Pinto. Sens fans want to hear, though, John, about what you think, what your expectations are for the Ottawa Senators this season. Should they make the playoffs? Should they, win the Stanley Cup? I don't know if that might be a little crazy. Or are they a team that's going to be on the bubble looking in from the outside?
I think they're a playoff team. I think they have to be. I think that's, not something that the organization is going to come out before game one and mark down as their mission statement. I think they've learned over the years how, when you say something ahead of the season, it can backfire a little bit, or all of a sudden you lose a little bit of traction. And that doesn't mean internally they aren't thinking it. It doesn't mean that that's not what the players want. I think it's absolutely what they are thinking as an organization. And I think that's their own internal expectation. And I would agree with that, especially with, as you mentioned, some of the moves that were made in the offseason. You don't go out and grab a guy like Vladimir Tarasenko to do what DeBrincat did, or, exceed what DeBrincat did, similar type of move. If you're not expecting to make the postseason, it just does not make sense. And certainly to round things out in that trade with Detroit, a guy like Kubalik, the grand plan was there. But it needed Norris and it needed Pinto. So until those two chips fall into place, it is going to be difficult. But I think this is a playoff team. I think it has to be this year for a lot of reasons. But we're going to find out real soon, aren't we, how solid this really good-looking defense is, and how rock solid, how trustworthy Korpisalo is under a heavy workload potentially. We know what Forsberg can do. Hopeful that upon full recovery, he can jump back to his old self, because that was just a gruesome injury. You don't wish that on anybody, but he'll be needed in support. But to me, this is Korpisalo's net to lose. And it's the expectation is, with the trials up front, well, there's a reason you went out and you grabbed Jacob Chikrin, you paid Branstrom, you paid Hamonic, and you have Sanderson and Zub together, and you paid Korpisalo. So it might have to be the defense provides offense type of situation. It might have to be that rock solid back end that inches them over the line in hockey games. They're going to need it to start, you would think, anyway. So I think the pressure's on the blue line and the pressure's on the guy in between the pipes.
I'm glad you actually mentioned that. I was about to mention the crease as the next kind of topic. So I guess we'll just segue into the defense and goaltending since you've touched up on it. And you were absolutely right. You don't give a guy like Korpisalo $20 million for 4 years this offseason if he's not your guy. Is he going to play 70, 60 games? No. But a tandem with Forsberg, which, by the way, those two have won a championship together, as you know, in Cleveland of the AHL, Calder Trophy. They have that winning pedigree. They have that experience winning together. It doesn't matter where you win. If you win with somebody, that's always a good sign. That's why Steve Stais was brought over, from Edmonton, I guess, but of course, from Hamilton when he was with Enlauer. When you have success at any level, success is always something you want to have around you, right? And especially when you've done it with that person. So I think with Forsberg and Korpisalo, it's going to be a great tandem. And especially for Forsberg, one of the most underrated goaltenders in the league. I might be a little biased, I don't know. But I think Forsberg's one of the most underrated goaltenders in the league. If you look at the advanced analytics, his goal saved above average is top 10 on one of the worst defensive teams last year. Now you have Jacob Chikrin, hopefully, for the full season. Artem Zub, who should have a big bounce back year. Same with Shabbat. You have Sanderson fresh off that contract. Of course, you have Brandstrom, you have Hamonic, got guys in the depth as well. So this is one of the best blue lines we've seen in over a decade, I'd say, maybe in Ottawa. Maybe that's a bit of a hot take. I don't know. But Ottawa has not had this strong of a blue line in quite some time. The goaltending should give them a chance to win every single night. So I'm not worried about that. All I will say, though, is the blue line, like you kind of alluded to, needs to contribute a little more offensively. They didn't really contribute at all offensively last year. Shabbat did a little bit. He's an offensive guy, though. You expect that. You need big seasons from a guy like Chikrin on that second power play unit, or Sanderson as well, because that will definitely help, especially when Ottawa is dealing with injuries in that forward core. Now, speaking of the forward core, I just want to ask you, there's some big names there. Timmy Stu, Brady Tkachuk, of course, Claude Giroux, Drake Batherson. Kind of talk to me about who you're looking at this year and who do you think will really break out into the scene this year? We know Tim Stützle last year broke out, but who do you think is going to lead the way for the Ottawa Senators this year? And overall, who are you looking at?
Well, there's two different ways to take a step back and look at things. There's so many guys on career years, including Claude Giroux last year, that you could be the guy with that's glass half empty and go, well, what's the likelihood of all those players cashing in on another big year again, or you glass half full, and that's kind of the tipping point, the starting point for a group that's now played together, succeeded together, albeit not making the playoffs, but succeeded offensively. And so the blueprint has been laid. I like the fact that they're going right back to Tkachuk, Stützle, and Giroux to start the season as a line. I think that's a terrific night one carryover from the success of last season. I do think Timmy Stützle is going to be, that 85 to 100 point guy. I don't think that's out of the reach again. I think Brady Tkachuk is easily a 40-40 guy. And,
really,
I think he's
40 goals next year.
I think he's building. No problem. I think he's building to eventually putting himself in a position to flirt with perhaps where Stützle was. But I think the biggest thing for Brady is, bringing being able to be an 82 game guy and bringing the style of play that not only leads to his offensive success and being a game changer in the point department for the team, but physically setting the tone, bringing the rest of the team with him. Not only leading on the ice, but leading in the dressing room, and to be healthy for 82 games to do that. I mean, there's not very many guys that play all 82 that have the penalty minutes he does and the points that he does. And, one of those few guys is his brother in Florida. And I'd say that turned out pretty good for the Florida Panthers as well. So, yeah, I'm watching all the same names that people are drawn to, especially on that top line. I think question mark for me is how soon does Kubalik and Tarasenko fit into the offense in a splashy way? I think the opportunity is there for a guy like Kubalik to refine his step as he did somewhat in Detroit, but certainly when he broke into the league in Chicago. This is an offensively minded team, and I think it's not a selfish group as well. They like to see everybody get their points. That's good for him. Tarasenko, man, if he can have a year like Giroux did, then that's a fantastic thing as well. And I don't think that's totally out of the question, although it certainly does depend who he plays with and where he plays in the lineup. So I think the pieces are there, but for now, I'm watching that top line because they're going to be the ones that, not on a nightly basis have to bring it and have to factor in. And like you said, when you get to the power plays, the idea is to have two strong units. That's not out of the question, but until Norris arrive, I think it's going to be a little bit of a musical chairs department for the special teams. And you might have to see, loading up that first unit and rotating guys in and out depending on how they're playing. And that's okay. But eventually, I think it is going to be a two-horse race where you have power play 1 and power play 2 that are both really difficult to play against, both offensively minded. And, that's where the Sens are trying to get to, is hitting their stride, having that lineup where they can put out on a nightly basis where teams are starting to wonder how to match up against them as opposed to just the other way around all the time.
And on that last point, I mean, the matchups without Norris and Pinto, it really sucks because this team on all 4 lines should be, and I'm maybe biased saying this, a nightmare for other teams because you have Pinto, a 20-goal scorer as a rookie on that third line, with Kubalik, a former 30-goal scorer in Chicago, 20-goal scorer in Detroit, pure sniper. Joseph on the third line right wing, more likely than not, or really Greg. The fourth line, Mark Kastelik, the guy wins nearly 6 out of 10 faceoffs. He's a faceoff winning machine. Your top 6 there is easily one of the best in the National Hockey League. I don't care if that is biased. It's just facts. I mean, Claude Giroux is nearly 37 years old and had his best year last year with the Ottawa Senators with this group of young stars. You see guys like Drake Batherson before that injury with Aaron Dell a couple of years back was amidst a breakout year. He's looked fantastic in the preseason as well. This team has the offense in the top 6. It all comes down to that depth and consistency, throughout that lineup. So like you said, musical chairs, let's just get through the first 5-10 games. But after 5-10 games, we're still playing musical chairs. That will be a big detriment on this team's chance to make the playoffs. We'll leave it off with this, John, because I know you have to go. You have a lot of things. And God, I cannot imagine how your arm, I'm sure, hurts a lot. You've been holding that phone for 30, 35 minutes there. I'm going to give you a bit of a rest in about 2 or 3 minutes here. But I just want to let you give a bit of a prediction. Where do the Ottawa Senators finish in the standings? Are they a division team, a wild card team? Because you said they're a playoff team. Where do you think?
Oh, I'd love to say division. That would be, that would certainly be the ultimate hope, I think, with the full complement of players that they could force their way in there. I'd say more likely is that they're a wild card team, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, they finished 6 points out of a team that went all the way to the Stanley Cup Finals. I think they really believe that they get in and anything can happen. And it's, look no further than last year for that exactly to take place. And this is a Sens group that knows they can compete with anybody in the league now when they're at their best and when they have their full complement of players. They know that they even have potentially some better days ahead this season if they can avoid injury and if their players particularly rise to the occasion like they expect them to do. So I think this is a confident group. I think this is a group that just needs some results to go their way. Yeah. Trying to avoid injury, what team isn't, obviously, but that's reared its ugly head several times over in almost every position for Ottawa over the last couple of seasons. But I think they're at worst a wild card team. I think there's a chance maybe that they succeed and excel well enough to talk about division, but I think more likely is a wild card team. And you know what? That's not a slouch. It just matters that they get in right at this point and break the 6-year spell here and really show Sens fans what they can do when they're in the postseason and what to expect as this core really starts to form its footprint in the National Hockey League. Right? It was a big year last year, big growing year. We talk about all those players that you mentioned hitting their stride. We know the group that's signed long term, so this is it. I'm not expecting really any big changes from that core group of players that are all in similar length contracts, and so this would be another continuation of the step up the ladder is to make the playoffs and get some of that experience and and maybe even play above what people expected them to do if they get in.
The pieces are there for this team to be a competitive one for years and years to come. Hopefully the pieces to that puzzle are completed this year. If not, I'm sure you can agree with me, John, there will be some big changes around this organization. We shall see a big year ahead. And John, we are so excited to hear you on TSN nightly. Where can people follow you and, of course, listen to your stuff on TSN and on Twitter and everything?
At Hockey Abs on Twitter, ABBS, or Abs Play by Play. Pardon me, that was my former handle. Abs Play by Play, so ABBS PXP on Twitter is the best way to catch me. And yeah, sharing the season with Gord Miller again, thankfully. Nice to be partnered up with him, Jamie McLennan, Dave Poulin, along with Mike Johnson. So we are all ready to go for the start of the Sens season. And hopefully it won't be too long before Ottawa has all the players that they want in their lineup, and we can really see what this team wants to do. So plenty of excitement, shaking with excitement. Apologies for the phone record here, but my goodness, it is fantastic to still have that enthusiasm, even with the absence of Norris and Pinto. I mean, not many teams would be able to overcome that. I think Ottawa, hopefully in the short term, we'll be able to, but this is the best part, is that Wednesday against the Hurricanes, it starts for real, and we'll see what this team is made of.
We're shaking, we're itching. We need hockey here in Ottawa, and it's finally here, John. It's finally here, my friend. Thank you so much for joining. It's always a pleasure. We'll talk during the year, and we'll definitely have to have you back again soon. John, take care. Absolute pleasure, and we'll see you soon.
You got it. Thanks very much for having me. Enjoy the coverage on TSN this year, everybody, and let's hope for a great season.
Absolutely. By the way, shout out TSN. I mean, the best coverage in Canada by far for hockey. Shout out TSN. Take care, guys.
Always appreciate it. Need all the love I can get.